Welcome to D5, assisting your design journey every step of the way. Today's session will all be about answering this question. Your rendering engine determines your efficiency, and we'll be focused on why this is so important and how your company can be more efficient, more productive. So we'll be covering tips and tricks and workflows. But before we dive in, let's do a little session overview. We'll be running through introductions quickly. We'll be talking about how D5 Render was integrated into our firm KPF as a case study, the impact of AI on architecture, a sneak peek into a never released tool by D5, and the future of design. I am Andy Cristoforo. I am the Applied Technology Specialist at KPF. I'm a licensed architect, an XR and AI specialist, and an educator. A lot of what I do is do R&D at KPF, understand new and upcoming workflows, figure out how we can leverage them at KPF, and handle a lot of the onboardings.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sherelle Liu. I have a background in architectural design and design technology. I currently work with Andy within the design and technology team at KPF. And outside of work, I'm currently in my third and final year of my Master of Architecture program at Columbia.
So a little bit about who is KPF. If you're unfamiliar with us, we are a global firm, and we're really well known for working on super large projects. And this is all to set the stage as to like why tools are so important for us. Because of the scale we work at, it's important that our tools can actually keep up with us with every single design phase. So we are a global firm. We have projects all over the world. We have almost a dozen offices, and it's important that we're able to collaborate with each other. And just a little fun fact, we've actually built and designed 6 of the world's 12 tallest skyscrapers, just so you get an idea of like the type of scale we're talking about. And it's really important for our tools to match that vision that we have. So if you're unfamiliar with what is D5 Render, it's a real-time rendering engine that creates stunning visuals very quickly. And some more fun facts, it was actually the first tool to integrate AI features. It works well with Autodesk Revit, 3ds Max, and Rhino. Very quick to generate beautiful results. And a lot of firms are using it more and more these days. So we want to go through a little case study of how KPF integrated this into our own workflow. And it all started with some questions and feedback we were getting from our studio. People wanted better visuals quickly. We wanted more AI tools to help us save time. We wanted better compatibility with our tools like Revit, 3ds Max, and Rhino. We wanted better development support from the devs. So if we have feedback or an issue, they can resolve it quickly. Scalable standards, because we are a global firm of almost 700 people. It's important that we can have standards across the whole office, and something that's flexible to work with us at every single design phase. So we recently selected D5 Render because it seemed to check all those boxes that we needed. And what was great about it is it was actually able to work at every single design phase. So in our concept phase, we're able to generate quick concepts quickly, rely less on outsourcing, easily generate design options. And then as we move into schematic and design development, bring those renderings to a higher fidelity, impress our clients with our visual quality, and just produce much better results. So this kind of brings us to our next question. How do you actually choose a rendering engine for a firm? So looking at the marketplace of options, we have things like Enscape, Twinmotion, Lumion, D5 Render as your real-time rendering engines. Then you have more complicated tools like Unreal Engine, Omniverse, V-Ray, and Vantage. Those are really for specialists, not really day-to-day use. And then you have a bunch of fantastic AI tools like Midjourney, Veros, Runway, and Magnific. So we have all these different options that do different things, but it was really up to us to try and figure out what makes the most sense. So when we started looking at this, we were using Enscape previously, and we found it was like a quick way to generate concepts, but the quality just wasn't there. So we started exploring Twinmotion, but it felt a little cartoony. We weren't getting our, floating seats that we need because again, we're a large firm. We can't constantly be switching seats in and out. Then we tried Lumion. It was struggling with larger scenes, quite expensive. And then we found that D5 was able to answer a lot of our issues. And then just here's a quick little breakdown of what we were able to see, just from like the quality point of view, functionality, cost, and the scale. D5 seemed to fit every single thing we needed. It was one of the cheapest options, and it was also the most powerful and the highest quality option, which is really rare to see out in the marketplace. So when we're looking at our specialist tools, we realize that a lot of these, although they do fantastic visuals, we can't actually implement into our day-to-day. So really, we needed to find something that could satisfy all of our designers' needs, and they're not ArcViz artists; they're architects that need to create presentations for their clients. And then we have all these fragmented AI tools, which are all great on their own, but it wasn't integrated into one tool. So D5 render, we were able to see, higher realism in less time, which is huge. We have scalable firm settings. We have AI tools, which we'll be talking more about, and how to improve your own efficiency. And it just worked with everything we threw at it, whether it's a large file or a certain file type, it just supported all that.
In this section, we'll be covering the top D5 time savers that we've found in our workflow. To start off, D5 offers things like one-click presets. In the past, when we've had to take our 3D clay models into a rendering engine, we've had to very manually assign these different settings. But with one-click preset, we can very quickly render out a scene for a presentation or a competition. The same applies with one-click weather. If you had a project that we needed to take from all 4 seasons, one-click weather is a very quick way for us to visualize them at different times of the year. Sometimes a lot of our projects will have massive landscapes, and to have to decorate those scenes manually is also a huge time suck. And with things like D5 Scatter, we're able to very quickly create a compelling landscape for our visualizations. Scatter presets give us a variety of things to choose from so that each of our visualizations have some variety. And render-ready materials also help us have a variety of materials that match up with the equally diverse range of materials in our material library. Next, with the asset library, something that makes the visualization compelling is that we have objects that compellingly mirror things in the real world. And with D5's extensive asset library, it has been very fast for us to make an image from a 3D clay model to something that is highly convincing. When it comes to visualizing areas that cover retail spaces, in the past we've had to model out interior spaces, but with the D5 feature of interior parallax, we're able to very quickly drag and drop these scenes into our models. As an example of how we've used it in a project, in this project over here, Soho Gubei in Shanghai, you'll see that these individual areas within the facade that make the building look occupied are in fact the result of interior parallax. Then here in the cloud space, this is another feature that helps us very quickly bring a visualization to life. Currently, the way our project teams work is that we have multiple people working in different file formats. With the multi-editor collaboration function within D5, someone who is working in Revit and Rhino and say within D5 itself is able to collaborate together effectively. And this came up within our recent projects. Next to that are the animation templates. For competitions, it's often the case that we'll be required to submit deliverables that involve animations. And instead of having to rig things from scratch, D5 offers a template of animation tools that we can very quickly apply to our projects, such as zoom, pan, or a 360 rotation. Going back to the Soho Gubei project, this is an example of how we've been able to capture these aerials and zooms. And finally, very importantly, there is the live sync function for both Revit and 3ds Max. And this enables us to work within the modeling space and have that instantly visualized next to us.
So some tips and tricks that we like to do, since our projects are so large, we often have to fill these large blocks of, plazas and everything. And you're actually able to group assets together, save it to your team space, and drag it out for other projects. So here you can see that we were able to quickly fill this plaza up in just a couple seconds. One of my favorite tricks is actually using backdrops to help add detail to areas that might not be modeled. So as you can see here, as I'm toggling this on and off, right now I have an urban view. If I toggle it off, I actually see the default background. So simple things like that can help speed up your workflows because you're not spending all this time modeling context and you've got a wide selection of backdrops to choose from. This is the multimedia material, and what's really clever about this is you can grab animated textures and apply them to a simple plane to make it look like something else. So these are faked waves all from one texture on a simple plane. There was no modeling, there was no crazy animation to do this. It was literally just a simple texture and a plane to create this. So the beauty of D5 is like you're able to be very creative with what's built into the software. And lastly, we've got the Scene Express. So the Scene Express is just a free marketplace of assets, files, and scenes all uploaded to one repository where you can actually download them and explore the scenes yourself. It's a great way to learn from others, like professionals that have been using DeFi for a long time, to see how they assemble their scenes, how they make their materials. So it's a fantastic thing that the community is driving. So we're going to zoom out a little bit and we're going to talk about the impact of AI. And we're going to bring this back into how D5 has integrated AI. So for those that haven't been in the AI space, what's happened in the past 2 years is the progress of these generative AI models has completely outpaced anything we've ever imagined. This is exponential growth. So 2 years ago, generating the same prompt of a New York City skyline, it looked like a really bad painting. And now if I do the same exact prompt, I get these beautiful dramatic images that are often correct when it comes to the landmarks and positioning of some of the iconic skyscrapers in the New York City skyline. And that's just 2 years. Imagine what it'll be in just a couple years. So what we always like to do is just to help drive that point home is, which of these four images is AI? Give you a second. The scary thing is all of them were actually AI. And if you just look at the details of a zoomed in image, everything looks perfect, from the textures of the cake, the colors of the berries, everything looks extremely convincing and realistic. My point here is it's important for us to adopt this technology because we're able to do so much in such a short period of time. This is a random, case study that I put together. I thought it'd be interesting to generate a project that isn't typically common, like a red, project, just like in a red landscape like Mars, and was able to do a fantastic job. Everything seems well composed, beautiful textures, and the more and more images I generated using the same prompts, they began to look similar to each other, almost like they were coming from the same project, which was insane because I thought it wouldn't be able to do that. Is another example. And if we were to just break down what's going on, we're seeing like consistent coloring in all these images. They're well composed. It understands composition. It's a consistent project. This took less than 5 minutes to generate all these images. Everything looks realistic, like the materials, the lighting, the geometry. Everything is extremely impressive. So to go back to this slide, if you look at where I've highlighted around the horizon, it mimics that perfectly. The wall panels on the right look like proper metallic panels. The joinery and the details of typical construction are all there. So it's crazy that in just a short period of time, we're able to see this kind of growth. So for us, it's really important to, follow these trends and make sure we're adopting it so we can be as efficient as possible. Here's some other images. And again, some of these are based on prompts we would typically use at the office, but to give anyone the power or the potential to generate this kind of imagery is incredible because to generate any of these with like an outsourced renderer would cost thousands of dollars, it would take weeks of time, and now we're talking about condensing this to less than a minute by just a couple sentences. And now with image to video becoming more and more popular, we're able to take those same images and have them become animated and brought to life. So now we've kind of come full circle where we can go from text to image to video which is huge because to what Sherelle was talking about earlier with animation, we're now able to do that in just one application in just, a couple sentences. Here are more images from a similar project, and just the consistency, I can't stress alone, is extremely impressive. And so now that we're looking at, what AI is doing, D5 was able to take some of the best features of what we were just talking about and actually implementing it into the render engine to help expedite the way we work. So some things that they've done is they've built in a upscaler. That's their SR AI boosted rendering algorithm. So if you create a 8K rendering, it won't take the same time that you'd see in the past where an 8K rendering could take 10 minutes. Now it's just going to take less than a minute or two because it's able to upscale. And there's some fantastic tools which we'll talk more about, like the AI atmosphere match, AI enhancer, texture map generator, and making things seamless, which are all things that designers typically struggle with. Here's an example of AI atmosphere match, where you're able to upload a reference image. It analyzes the image and applies all those settings to your scene. So we're talking about time of day, the coloring, the contrast, the overall look and feel from one reference image. And as designers, that's typically how we work. We find an image that we like, it becomes our look and feel, and we can now add that to our own workflow. So we don't need to go to a different tool for this. It's actually just integrated right into our tool here. So this is huge for those designers that aren't comfortable changing every single setting, because to do this manually, to go from a bright sunny day to cloudy to brighter, higher contrast colors, that can take a lot of time. So for this to be done with one image, extremely powerful. Here's an example on that same project, the Soho project. Each of these four images, they were given a reference image and then it was applied. So within 30 seconds for each of these, we can go from a moody sunset all the way to a cold, snowy day. It was really powerful because in most rendering engines, you need to spend about like 10 minutes to go between each of these options. And then there's the AI enhancer. So the images coming out of D5 are already beautiful, but using the AI enhancer that's built in, it'll actually do another pass over the image to add more detail to the vegetation, people, and textures to make it look even more photorealistic. And this is great because our designers, as much, they don't have as much time as we'd like for them to spend rendering. They're always on deadlines. So the ability to go the extra, 10, 20% to finalize the image with just one click, that's huge for us. Here's another example. You can see that the vegetation, the materials are getting much sharper and they look more realistic. Again, this is one click. And this is the AI texture map generator. So what happens is designers will grab a spec of a material they really like, they'll drop it into the render engine, and they'll call it a day. But they often forget that you need other texture maps like ambient occlusion, normal maps, roughness, and all that. So what you're seeing here on the driveway, right now it looks plain and flat, but once it goes to the AI generator, it starts adding that detail from a roughness map to make things look, slightly shinier, slightly rougher, slightly beat up from the normal map. And that's, again, all being done in seconds by just uploading an image and then going to the AI enhancer.
So now that we've seen the zoomed out impact of these rendering tools and the AI tools, the Soho Grube Tower that KPF designed and built was a case study that we zoomed in on, and this really cemented D5's role in accelerating the workflows at KPF. So to start, we were very interested in recreating an image of the tower. I'll give a couple of seconds and see if you can guess which one is the rendering and which one's the actual photograph. So the one on the right is from D5. You can see the vegetation matches very well with what is on site. The tower is very convincing. The context models are all within D5 as well, so we didn't have to go through the extra effort of finding those. And all in all, even with the reflections in the water, those are something to take note of because it's very difficult to achieve this kind of realism in some of the other rendering engines that we've tried. To take another example here, there was a view of looking up at the tower, and let's take another guess at which one is the photo and which is the rendering. The one on the right is the rendering by D5. In addition to matching the details within the photograph of this tower, it was also able to enhance some of the features with the highly customizable sky settings. If we zoom out a bit, this is another rendering that was done within D5. You can see the realism of the towers behind. Oftentimes, whenever we put together renderings, having a believable context is quite challenging. And within D5, it was very easy to accomplish that effect. Next up, we have a closer up view that Andy showed earlier that went through the enhancer tool within D5. As you can see here, the materials are very sharp. The context within the background are believable. And with the addition of the interior parallax, these interior scenes, it makes the building look inhabited and not just a 3D model. If we zoom out again here, you'll see the application of a different weather setting, and this can help us put our renderings, our projects into different scenarios. Then over here within a sunnier day, you can see how well the light reflects off the building, and it's almost indistinguishable from an actual photograph. Next up, a closer view of the night view of the tower. And here within the aerial, some things to make note of are how quickly D5 was able to render out the scene. Some things to make note of are the scattered vegetation, the vehicle path, the illumination, and the fog. These are very they demand a lot of light scattering, and typically this takes a long time for other rendering engines to achieve. But within D5, we were able to generate an image like this within less than a minute. Something else that we really appreciate about D5 is the fact that you can bring in geometry from different file formats. So within this scene alone, you see that D5 contributed to the asset library. The original tower came from Revit. We have models that were FBX files. The scatter tool helped us very quickly generate this scene. And the work set here is something that brings together everything for our team members. Here's another breakdown within the night scene. And then you can see here with the addition of the interior parallax, we're able to create this non-homogeneous glowing volume. So it actually looks like it's being inhabited. This was also another one of the images that we tried to recreate within D5. So as I showed earlier, the top left corner is the real image, and we try to recreate the scene using different rendering engines. I'll give everyone a couple seconds to guess which one was by D5. So as you can see here, D5 not only was able to render out this image very, very quickly, it was also able to achieve a level of realism and similarity with the photograph that we weren't able to see within other rendering engines. The same test was applied to different views, and you can see the high degree of similarity between the rendering on the right and the photograph on the left. And not only is it able to do that in exterior, within the interior, it also achieves a high level of believability and global illumination so that your spaces aren't dark and they're well lit. This one is another example of the atrium. And with the addition of those entourage, we were able to match the photo as well.
Now we want to give some tips and tricks around how to drive adoption. So one thing that we always found is it's really important for us to understand the needs of our studio, whether that's leadership or the designers. And we want to make sure we find something that actually aligns to what they want. We don't need something with all the bells and whistles. We need something that actually aligns with the needs. So, we always say, focus on finding the one tool that aligns the most with your team. Because we find that we're often sold to a bunch of different tools that, do a thousand different things, but they're often unused tools or features. And it's important that we understand what our team needs before selecting something. So step one is when it comes to us testing a tool, we always run a pilot program. We'll reach out to our power users. We'll let them know that we're interested in testing this new software, and we want them to actually drive this and report back and see if it was a good idea or not. Because we're in the technology space at KPF, we see things a little bit differently than a designer, just because they use it on a day-to-day basis for very specific workflows which we might not be aware of. So that's why it's really important to get your power users to test this. After that, we prepare a case study. We want to see, was this actually worth pursuing? Were there any benefits? And just see the overall metrics. And some things that we always like to test is like, were things faster? Did things look more realistic? Was it just easier to use? And most importantly, like, did you have fun? Because when tools are fun, people are they have more of an incentive to actually go back to them and use them. If they find that there's too much friction to use and it's a little too clunky, they're not going to go back to it, even if it's the best tool ever. It really needs to kind of fit this perfect balance of being useful, but also user friendly. And my favorite thing is once we have a really successful case study, we see that FOMO spreads throughout the office. Basically, the pilot teams are the first ones to try this. They really like it. They start adopting it. And the teams surrounding them are like, hey, what are you using? Like, these images look great. We're really curious about it. And the next thing you know, this is kind of spreading like wildfire. And it's actually pretty incredible to kind of see this happen. We've had this happen a couple times at KPF, and it's really amazing how fast people can spread the word when it's something they're excited about. And going back to what I was saying about if the tool is fun and useful and saves people time and headaches, like it basically sells itself in a way where the teams are like happy to talk about it and share their work because they're proud of it. And then lastly, this really leads to global adoption. It starts out with just, one or two teams piloting it, and then within a very short period of time, it's made its way throughout all of our offices, and becoming the new standard. So just some general tips and tricks for those that are trying to drive adoption within your own firm. The biggest thing for us is like we need to make sure these tools address the pain points. This goes back to like aligning the vision of the designers and leadership with the correct tools. So we want to make sure we're minimizing friction and that it's actually solving a problem. And the people that spend the time during their day to like go out and do this and explore and like talk to you, celebrate what they're doing, make sure you're giving them the support, but you're also sharing their findings and giving them a little boost in terms of visibility so people can see the great work they're doing. And then next, it's really important that leadership is behind all of this. If they're seeing that, hey, we can potentially save money doing this, investing in a new tool, but in the long term, we'll actually save money on outsourcing rendering. That's a huge win. I think the work you're doing on this kind of scale shouldn't be in a vacuum. It does affect the day-to-day to designers. So it's really important that leadership is part of that conversation because they might have feedback on the existing tools that you can probably answer with something new. And then lastly, this idea of quality of life over features. Again, it's important to have a bunch of features, but it's more important that they're actually relevant and it's not fluff and they'll solve the issues designers are having. Okay, we don't need 20,000 features. We'd much rather, 50 really great features that people will use on a day-to-day basis. So in terms of how we help support teams, and what works the best for us is we often found that doing workshops, either led by, someone at D5 or by one of us as, being part of the visualization team, that seemed to be the most effective. And that's basically hands-on. We all meet in a conference room and we kind of build a project together and we're answering questions. And it's almost like a feedback loop of where people are asking questions, they're getting answers, and 10, 20, 30 people are learning at the same time. Then there's team onboardings. These are smaller, more intimate sessions where it's 5 to 10 people at a time and a specialist meeting to go through that. And then we have our own community group where it's a very large group chat where we're sharing tips and tricks with all of our users. It's a good way to share updates, share assets, and help build a community around these types of things. And then lastly, which is still effective, are the Scene Express files and tutorial videos. This is like a good way to fall back and send something to someone like, hey, check out this scene or check out this video. It'll answer your question. But we found the most important thing is to actually do this as a team. Don't just throw a tool at somebody and expect them to understand what to do and just run with it. You really need to kind of hold their hands in the early days of this just so they're using it to the fullest potential. Because if they think they're using it correctly, but it could be much more efficient, that's the real win for designers. So after doing this case study, what we found is a lot of our renderings at 4K resolution were done within 40 seconds, which was huge. We don't have to wait hours or weeks from a outsource agency to send us images. Our in-house quality floor was immediately increased. So instead of having things looking a little bit cartoony or a little conceptual, right out of the gate, people are able to create photorealistic renderings. And then actually on our pilot project, we were able to save about $25,000 in renderings. So instead of outsourcing a dozen different renderings to companies to create, for $1,500 or $2,000 an image, we're able to do all of that in-house in just a couple days. So that's huge because to send something out and have it outsourced, that takes a week for the agency to complete. And then there's back and forth between our designers, like, oh, change this material. It's much better to have it in-house because of how quick things move within our office. And then we're happy to say that within 3 months of launching this pilot program, we're able to onboard 150 users. Like I said earlier, KPF is about 600, 700 people. So in terms of like who actually touches images and renderings, we figure that's about 300, 350. So about half of the potential user base is already on D5, which is huge.
In this section, we'll be covering a very special sneak peek of D5 Lite. This is a product that they're currently working on and that they will be rolling out very soon, so keep an eye out for that. As you can see here, it took the model from Revit and it instantly generated these different rendering options. So we'll be covering how D5 Lite can be applied to a variety of different project types and how you can skip over the manual application of materiality, environment settings, and even context to achieve the final image or even just help brainstorm ideas very quickly. To start here, we have residential. And as you can see, it went from the model to these very different look and feels. Another example of the residential application with D5 Lite takes you from different seasons. And then if we want to change to a different type of program, it also works very well with commercial. So it's definitely not limited to project type. And if we wanted to zoom out to an aerial scale, it also accomplishes that goal very effectively. So to zoom in on a project that we were able to apply this to within KPF, we use 64 University Place as an example. So over here, you can see the Revit window. D5 Lite is directly integrated from within as a plugin. So when you open your Revit file, you can access D5 Lite from within, and you can choose all these different settings, enter a prompt, and give it a couple seconds to generate a result for you. Ta-da. And then next I'll be going through some of the results just to show you how many different results we can come up with just by using D5 Lite. And this is especially effective during the concept phase when maybe you have your model geometry, but not a very clear idea of how the materiality should express itself. And so instantly you can see these various options that you can choose from and perhaps help you eliminate a few of the ones that are not as suitable and very quickly spot ones that will be.
Great. So now let's talk about using all these different tools in one workflow. And this is all from the D5 ecosystem, which is pretty incredible that one company is able to handle the AI side as well as the 3D side. So looking at our case study is we can start out designing in our typical DDC tools that could be either 3ds Max or Revit or Rhino. And as we're designing there, we can use D5 Lite to generate a bunch of different design options before we even start opening up a render engine. So it's great that directly from our source application, we can start testing out ideas like, oh, what does it look like if it's black brick or red brick? Or how does the building react when it's sunset or sunny day? So for a designer that has no experience rendering, this is huge for them because they're able to drive this with just reference images or text prompts. And then once they're happy with the decision in terms of design options, they can start focusing on actually building up the rendering model within D5 Render, create a real-time visualization of it, and from there, that can help inform the design process as needed. Once the documentation is done, our project is built. So now we have a workflow where we essentially have D5 helping us at every single phase of our design process. So in terms of the future of design and some of the workflows and where we're going is we're really interested in this idea of like, can AI tools and D5 render become our default rendering option within the firm? As we were talking about in the intro, we have all these different tools out there, but instead of using all of them, can we just get away with just one super powerful tool? And that's the default. Like people don't have to think about which one to use, they just know which to go to. And so, because of the power of D5, we're able to kind of templatize a lot of the typical work. The funny thing, which we realize, is every designer on every single different team makes the same materials all the time and the same light setups. Like there's only so many types of metal, and people are always making them from scratch. So to be able to put everything in a template in a nice material library where they can just use the app they're using, like D5, open up the material library, and then just apply it so they don't have to manually sit there and like understand, PBR materials and everything. Like we've done the work for them. This is huge for us. So we're really simplifying the process to generate images, and we're also just elevating the floor of our quality, right? We want everyone to create beautiful images. It shouldn't just be on power users. So to be able to give our experience to them for them to use to generate better images, that's really what we want to focus on. So in terms of where the industry is kind of moving with all this is we really think that a lot of tools will start to begin to adopt more and more AI integrated tools. There's something really important about simplifying tedious tasks like generating textures or generating high quality renderings or things like that where designers, again, they're architects, they're not archivist specialists, they shouldn't have to worry about this stuff. So anytime we can kind of, I don't want to say cut corners, but like save time using AI, that's something we're super interested in, especially as the projects get more complicated, they get larger. We need all the help we can get. And it's more important that these tools are actually part of the workflow. We don't want them to be isolated, separate tools. We want it to be part of their workflow. So if they're working directly in Revit, they never need to leave Revit because that's where they're working. They can continue designing. They don't need to be brought out of that environment. And we really believe that the firms that recognize all this are going to be the most competitive in the future, because there's just no way to compete with a firm that has fully adopted AI. So we're happy to be embracing all this technology because we really believe that this is the future. So what we've done in the handout, if you are super interested in using D5 and like learning more about this, we've included a bunch of tips and tricks, as well as how to use D5 Lite, some of our favorite tricks. We've got plenty of images and diagrams in there to help explain all this. So definitely check out the handout, download it, give it a read. We spent a lot of time creating this kind of documentation for you. And what D5 has agreed to do is actually give the users here a free trial, or book a demo if you want to know more. So feel free to scan this QR code I'll leave it up for a second. And then lastly, if you have any questions or want to talk to myself or Sherelle even further, please scan our QR codes and connect with us. I'll leave this up for a second. And most importantly, please don't forget to fill out the survey for this session. We'd love to know what you think, how we can improve. And overall, thank you for your time. We'll be answering any questions right after this. Thank you all.